All right. Back at it again. We are here getting in another last-minute episode of the Three Priests Walk in a Bar podcast. It is currently Monday, October 26th. This is set to release on Tuesday, October 27th. So, as is tradition, we are right at the last minute getting you the most, we call it the most relevant content possible.
That's right.
It is up to date. As of, I guess, when you're listening to this yesterday.
Local, breaking.
Live, local, and breaking. Yes. So if there are any disasters that happen within the next hour or so, you will hear about them here. If they happen outside right where we are. All right. We're a little scattered in locations today. I think Father Nick is outside today. You said you're at your mother's house. Where is she located?
I'm in New Kent.
New Kent. Oh, okay. Yeah. That's not too bad.
No, not too far away.
All right. Everybody else is in their normal locations. But yeah, we got a good episode in store, I think. I don't know. It's not scripted. But I feel like it could lend itself to some good discussions, and it's one that we have been kind of sitting on for a while. But since this is going to be released right before Halloween, we figured this would be a good time to do it. So I'm going to try to remember all the things Father Nick just listed. I think he said we're talking about ghoulies, ghosties, long-legged creepies, and things that go bump in the night. Is that what you said?
Oh, so close. It's ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties and things that go bump in the night.
Long-leggedy beasties. Now, this is that a quote from somebody?
So apparently, and this is something I've heard for a long time, and I tried to do a little bit of research beforehand, but I didn't waste too much time with that. I've heard that it goes back to a Scottish liturgy, but I've also read recently on the internet that some people trace it back to a Cornish litany or Cornish prayer. So somewhere in the UK, they said that prayer, and it's traced as far back as I think the 16th century.
Interesting.
That's the source of corny jokes.
I think it's probably an internet farce. Nick got duped.
So no. I mean, I first heard about it in liturgics class. Like I first heard about it as being a part of a Scottish litany and one of the Scottish prayer books. So,
I believe it. I was just teasing. But, that's a big part of the culture in the old times. So I think it could be an interesting discussion today.
So, yeah, the discussion is going to kind of be like, I guess we'll just do what?
Eclectic.
Yeah, it'll be very eclectic. Kind of go around and see, like, we could talk about like what each person kind of thinks about all that stuff. What do our traditions even have anything to say about them? Is there room kind of in the Christian worldview to allow for ghoulies, ghosted, long-legged, I don't know, long-legged things, and all manner of Monsters Incorporated beasts coming out of the closet at night. So this is going to be. Oh, he's got something on the tip of his tongue. I see it.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, Father Adam looks like some kind of beast most of the time. So
this will be a wholesome, family-friendly time, we hope. And we're going to try to keep it so.
He's more like Monsters Incorporated Sully, He's like somebody that's kind of cute. You want to take him home.
You just want to take him. What, is he a pet?
Yeah, he's a pet.
Sometimes he bites.
He doesn't eat a lot, but he drinks a lot.
Right. I was going to say, he's going to make your alcohol bill shoot way up.
Well, speaking of drinks, we need to go around and talk about what we're drinking. Yeah, let's start to my bottom right on my screen is Pastor Lou.
Oh, okay. Well, I haven't tried this yet. I am about to open it up, but it was inspired by this podcast I have. Not today, Satan.
Oh my gosh. Wait. I was just wearing that sweater.
Were you really?
I was just wearing that sweater. For those of you watching the video, I have a Not Today Satan sweater. I also have it in a long sleeve shirt.
We have a spiritual connection.
Yes, look at that.
So
look at God.
It is an IPA.
Never mind. There
And
goes
then-
the connection.
And it's 7.3%. And it pours like a luscious drink.
Oh,
Who makes it?
A little cloudy.
What's the brewery?
Oh, wait, we're gonna get his first reaction here.
I give it a thumbs up. I won't rate it yet because I need to try it a little much more. It is Mispillion River Brewing in Delaware.
Okay.
Miss Billion River.
Anyway, I just like the name.
That was good. Father Adam, what do you have?
I am about to open a can of Ballast Point Brewing Company Pineapple Sculpin. Now, I was quite skeptical of it, but I received a gift of it just yesterday from Father John's, one of his parishioners. He dropped me off a case of this, and I was like, pineapple? That's like a pineapple pizza. I don't approve. But I was like, how could I not sample this? So I had one last night, and I was very surprised. It's a delightful beer. The pineapple is very subtle. It's an IPA, and one that I quite like, actually. I definitely
I figured it was an IPA with that pineapple in it.
It was called a pineapple what now?
right. Pineapple Sculpin.
Sculpin. I've never heard that.
A pale ale with natural pineapple flavors, and Ballast Point Brewing, wherever that. Oh, San Diego, California.
Okay.
But I'm very impressed with the flavor. Like, I'm always very critical of IPAs because not all of them are good. Many of them are, but not all of them are. I like them about 25% of the time because I'm that discerning about it. But I am shocked actually that I like this. It's quite good. It's not sweet or anything. It's a very robust IPA, and the what do you call it? The ABV is 7%.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice. I recommend it.
Cool. Father Nick?
All right. So a couple things. Apparently the neighbor who is leaf blowing has stopped leaf blowing. So thanks be to God for that. Also,
I exercised him, Nick.
I appreciate it, Pastor Luke.
What a blowhard she was.
Probably the only time a Protestant exorcism's ever worked, but
Oof. Very possibly.
anyway,
Sent her a text and said, "The power of Christ compels you."
Speak for yourself, Nick.
So and for those who are just listening or haven't been paying close attention as they're watching the video, Father Adam has a picture of himself.
Oh yeah.
On the shirt that he's wearing.
That's a product placement.
He is wearing the original Three Priests Essence of Father Adam design on a hoodie, which is just himself holding a beer in a collar that says off duty.
Which I think should be incredibly viral as a picture and a big seller, but I don't know.
I thought it would be. That's but it's still available for sale.
We needed to put googly eyes on it.
Yeah.
Two of them were purchased, right?
Yeah, both by you.
Oh, he loves himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. You realize that the more you love yourself like that, the more you have to love your neighbors, according to Jesus. So
well, I'm offering everybody a pint in this picture, it looks like.
I mean, I've heard of how it's tacky to wear like the shirt of the band you're about to go see in concert to the concert, but I don't know, this might take it to a whole new level if you wear the shirt of yourself to the podcast you're about to be on.
Kind of like, shameless product placement of myself.
Has your wife commented on that yet?
Oh, she thought it was a great photograph. My cousin took the picture the evening before our uncle's funeral in August, and we had a hotel room, one of those apartment kind of deals that's got bedrooms and stuff, and because it was up in Northern Virginia, and neither of us was going to drive from our very distant homes, and while we come from an Irish Catholic family, there was not going to be any pints shared at the wake or at the funeral repast. And I said, well, we just can't have an Irish Catholic funeral without pints. And so back at the hotel, we filled up pint glasses and had several pints together. And I was just saying, cheers. And he said, hang on, hold that pose. Takes out his phone and snaps it. So he's the original photographer of the essence of Father Adam.
And it worked.
And so I bought one for me and one for him. It's okay. I'm okay. Nobody else bought it.
I still have to get the Ecumeniac shirt.
Yeah.
I bought one of those too.
Anyway, tell them where they can get them, sweet baby Nick.
Yes, you can get them at bonfire.com / 3 priests walk in a bar. You can just search 3 priests walk in a bar on the homepage of bonfire.com, and we are the only thing that comes up, oddly enough. And yeah, we post the link on Facebook every now and again, if you're not in the group, or follow us on like the podcast page or Instagram or all kinds of places like that. Again, all hate mail can be sent to the Forked Church at St. Martin's Parish.
The Forked Church.
I'm gonna cut things off there.
Okay.
All right. So the beer that this is actually a repeat. This was the same thing that the last time we
party
recorded.
foul, isn't it?
I don't know. Father
I think
Adam
it
did
is.
Coronas like for
that's
something
true.
like
You're right.
4 months straight. So
That's true. I was trying to bolster the Corona Beer Company for being.
But just because one of us sins doesn't mean you have to sin too.
Yep.
Pastor
Shall I
Lou
sin
has
more that
done
grace may abound?
variations. Pastor Lou has done variations of Narragansett. So
It's still different. Go ahead.
all right. Well, anyway, it's the same as last time we recorded. I've got the Southern Tier Warlock Imperial Pumpkin Stout, and you can see the little pumpkin right there. So
I see the pumpkin behind you.
yeah, oh yeah, and I've got some Halloween decorations up because Halloween is like my favorite non liturgical holiday. Although we do have in the Episcopal Church a liturgy for the eve of All Hallows.
I'm not a big, we do too. I'm not a big fan of Halloween. I mean, it's just when they used to have, and when I was in the Army and they try to have a Halloween party, I always say I'd go as the Invisible Man. It's just not my thing. I'm more than happy to have it be Reformation Day, but of course I do participate. I do give kids candy and stuff.
I mean, I think for Father Adam, Reformation Day is even more scary than Halloween.
Yes, and that's part of the joy of being friends with him. I can scare him all week.
I'm working on, or Sarah came to me not too long ago with a couple's costume idea, and it's actually a brilliant couple's costume idea, but I won't reveal it yet. I'm gonna wait to post it in the group later on. Is
it Martin Luther and Melanchthon?
It's not. It's way more budget than that. I couldn't afford that.
Is it Henry VIII and a beheaded Anne Boleyn?
Actually, it's Henry VIII and a turkey leg.
Have you seen that kid's costume picture where it's Henry VIII and a beheaded Anne Boleyn?
Oh, yeah.
That's actually interesting. Yo,
Fantastic.
That's a good idea. Okay, so for anybody that wants to do a Henry VIII costume, get 2 of you in like a large set of pants, and then like have her head coming out on like a plate. So it could work. It could work. Anyway, but yeah, Sarah's not too into Halloween. I like it, but like we try to do like couples costumes when we can. It's fun, just something to do. I love trick-or-treating when I was younger.
I just want to let folks know that are watching on YouTube that it's just coincidental that Father Nick and I are wearing our clerics. It's not because we are worried about evil in the world, but Father Adam, of course, is not. But it is funny.
In his picture, he is. He's just off duty.
That's true.
In my picture, I've got my cleric on.
but this topic is something that is a little squirrely with a lot of folks that are Christians. So it's an interesting thing.
It is. Oh, I'm drinking a just so I can get this and we'll get on with the topic. This is a Founders. I've had Founders before on the episode, but this is a different one. This is a breakfast stout. If you've never,
Breakfast stout.
yeah, if you've never tried the Founder's Breakfast Stout, it's one of my favorites. It's like a oatmeal, double chocolate and oatmeal stout. It's very, very good. I think the ABV is like 8 something. I don't remember, which is why I wanted to eat and have some water with me.
That's impressive for a stout, that high ABV.
It's very good. Nice, rich, kind of chocolatey flavor. So check them out. There, you can find them everywhere. Yeah, so that's kind of what we've got going on around the table, the virtual kids table. Which again, I can't wait to get back around the real kids table. Hopefully in the not too distant future.
Here.
But for the time being, we're good here.
Yeah, except for the times that Father Adam ghosts us.
Yes. And almost forgets to turn off his camera when he goes to the bathroom.
Yeah, for folks on Facebook, or not, we were mocking Father Adam. He slept through our appointed rounds, but he's a working man. He works hard. He works at night with all the ghosts and goblins and ghouls.
I do work with all the ghosts and goblins and ghouls. That's the time. In fact, I was driving during the day the other day, and the folks that I was picking up were just not my people. And I could feel that. I texted the wife and I said, I really feel like an imposter. Like the sun is out. I see things way differently. And I'm just not picking up my usual. I mean, I picked up just as many, but yeah, they just weren't my people. I mean, I drive what goes bump in the night.
It's work. I worked midnight shift for 6 years, and you meet some interesting folks.
Yeah. The ones that really only come out at night, and
literally,
they tend to be the most, I guess you could say, amusing people. They're just not working stiffs in a hurry to get to work or what have you. I mean, you get some of those, of course. You do get a fairly normal ride almost every other ride, but even when you're driving through the night, you really do pick up what goes bump in the night. And I think I've gotten so accustomed to that I find driving during the day, it's just so dull. Like there's literally nothing going on.
A TV show based on Father Adam's life, where it's like the 1980s or 1990s, where they're seeking out like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or the different people that were looking for ghost stories and everything. You guys are too young, I guess. There used to be a bunch of shows like that where there'd be solving mysteries, kind of like X-Files was like that on steroids and more popular. But there was a whole bunch of different series of different people looking into the spiritual, spooky stuff and hunting.
Oh yeah,
I think Father Adam would be a perfect character.
I have to admit to never having seen a single episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Me neither. It's okay.
Did you see the X-Files at all?
Yeah, I like the X-Files. That was good.
I never watched the show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but actually, during October, Sarah, and this is confusing, right? Because both Nicks have a Sarah.
Yeah.
But my Sarah and I have been watching every evening either a TV show or a movie that's like Halloween or Ghoulies, Ghosties, and Long-leggedy Beasties related. And so we've been watching a lot of X-Files, and just last week we watched the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie, not the TV, but the movie. Which is just ridiculous, of course.
Interesting. Is it like a made-for-TV movie?
No. It was like in the theater. I think wasn't Luke Perry in it or something? Who was like big stuff back then.
The original Buffy was a movie.
Yeah.
So he died, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Nothing holds a candle to the second live-action Scooby-Doo movie.
I've never seen the live-action Scooby-Doo movies.
Monsters Unleashed, man, it's a classic. I remember it came out on my birthday, like in 2004 or something like that. It was great.
2004. How old were you?
I would have been 9, I believe.
Oh, I had children and stuff even then.
Sorry. Okay,
I was in my third career by then.
Another great show that kind of goes around with that. Like my sister's a really big fan of the show called Supernatural.
Oh yeah, I've seen that one.
It's like Demon Hunters.
Yeah.
I haven't watched that one either.
That
My
one is
kids like that show a lot, and I watched it 1 or 2 times, and I was like, for a good storyline potential in a lot of those, the acting is so wretched. I'm like, they could have done a
oof.
seriously good show with good actors.
My sister would pick a fight with you on that one.
I just can't stand the acting. It's so dreadful. And it's not like cheeky dreadful or punchy dreadful. Like it's like literally folks that were trying to do good acting and just did not hit it on the head.
Well, they're on their
couldn't watch
final.
it.
They're on their final season this year, and it's like season 15.
I was gonna say, what is it, season 29?
Yeah, it's they've been on for a while, so they've got a dedicated fan base. But anyway, thank you for tuning into this episode of the Three Priest TV Review podcast.
Well, we're gonna make our own show. I suggested we make the Kai Files. Remember
the Kai Files? That's right.
Our little tagline is "The beer is out there."
It truly is.
Oh man, that's what we'll call our next.
I want
next
to
live gathering.
imbibe.
You what?
You want what?
I want to imbibe.
I want to
If I
imbibe.
want to believe, right?
Oh.
That would work too. Very good, Nick.
Nice.
Cheers.
All right. Well, let's use that. Let's use that as a segue to kind of get into this whole topic of ghoulies and ghosties. There's podcasts and TV episodes and all kinds of things that deal with like different legends and stories from around the world. There's a really great podcast that I know Father Nick and I are fans of. I wish he was by the computer to be able to hear this.
He's blowing.
Oh, there he is. There's a great podcast that Father Nick and I are fans of called Lore, by a guy named Aaron Mankey, that talks about folklore and hauntings, things like that, just stories. So there's no shortage of ideas. Yes, Father Nick did ghost us there for a second. There's no shortage of stories and legends about these supernatural creatures, entities, whatever they are. Every culture has stories, and a lot of them, are they're just that, they're stories. But it sometimes, it can get to a place where like maybe there might be a little something more to these things, and that's kind of where we got to jump in and say like, well, what are these things? Do our traditions have anything to say about them? Is there room in Christian theology for like extra biblical spiritual entities, or things of that nature? I don't know. These are just things. These are questions that I'm making up off the top of my head. And how does the church kind of deal with that kind of stuff? So I know Father Nick has been doing his research, so maybe he can start us off and give us some topics to springboard off of.
Yeah, that sounds good. So one of the reasons why we're doing this, I've been kind of advocating for this episode, but also one of our listeners, Daniel, who was a former parishioner of mine when I was doing university ministry. I was doing chaplaincy at the University of Virginia, a while ago. He was working on his PhD, and he's actually just finished his dissertation and is getting ready to defend it. And his work, his dissertation, has been on ghost hunters. And so not on ghosts, but on the actual people who do this. And you can do a quick internet search, and I'm sure there's a group wherever you are in your hometown that does at least probably not professionally, but does quote unquote ghost hunting. It's become a real phenomena. And so anyway,
Daniel Foxbug?
I'm sorry?
Are you talking about Daniel the Anabaptist?
No. This is a different one.
Okay.
When we put out the way back, we kind of threw out there to our Facebook group, what kinds of episodes do you want to hear?
Yeah.
He really advocated for one on ghosts, and but we thought we got to wait until October, and so we waited until the very last minute in October to
the absolute last minute,
right. So I'm gonna say one, as far as I know, the Episcopal Church, Anglican tradition has no official stance on this, right? I mean, it's not an issue that kind of comes up in theology, questions of ghosts and that kind of thing. Now, demons are another topic, and I think maybe Pastor Lou might pick up on some of that. But I really want to kind of focus in on the question of ghosts and other kind of creatures that go bump in the night like that. And there's not really an official stance that I'm aware of, and nothing in our doctrine about it, of course, because it's just, I mean, it's tangential. It's what, you know, I guess Luther might call adiaphora, but you know, but when I mention that, and I mention to people also that I don't believe in ghosts as much as I love Halloween and I love, you know, all this kind of stuff, this scary stuff or whatever, the macabre. I don't believe in ghosts, you know, and what I found is this gets more of a reaction from people than any religious statement I could say. Like I could say I don't believe in God. Oh, okay. But you don't believe in ghosts? What's wrong? Let me tell you about this experience I had, or this experience that my cousin's grandmother had, or whatever. I mean, you know, I mean, I seriously, like, I remember getting in an like argument with my college roommate over the existence of ghosts, and he was like upset that I didn't believe
Interesting.
in ghosts. Yeah, I mean, like, and so you're right. So it's always struck me as very odd that this is something like that our culture really clings to. But when I tell Christians this, fellow Christians, ones who actually know their Bible, so usually not Lutherans and Episcopalians and Orthodox. No, I shouldn't say that. But anyway.
Oh, Lou was straight faced that entire time. I don't think he found that funny at all.
He had a kind of haunted look, I'd say. Anyway, when I say this, usually two things I hear right away. What about the Witch of Endor? And what about Jesus when he appears risen, and he says, "I'm not a ghost." And so the one about Jesus appearing risen, he says, "I'm not a ghost." The word is pneuma, or pneuma, however you want to say it. It's the word for spirit, right? He says, "I'm not a spirit." Here you can see the wounds in my wrists and in my feet. Hand me a piece of fish. I'll eat some fish with you, because apparently, ghosts don't eat fish, or spirits don't. But that's really it's not so much when he's talking about that. It's as opposed to spirit, right? He's bodily resurrected. He's not like, for example, in John chapter 3, when he refers to God as spirit, right? So he says to the woman at the well, you Samaritans worship on Mount Gerizim, we Jews worship on Mount Zion, but the Father is spirit and seeks those who will worship him in spirit and truth. He's not in a place, right? He's spirit. And that's what he's trying to say. Look, don't be confused. I'm bodily raised. This actually is the resurrection. It's not just a vision from God. It's a bodily resurrection. The resurrection has begun. So that really has nothing to do with ghosts in that section. And then the other one, the Witch of Endor, and if you read a lot of modern translations, they'll call her the medium of Endor. I don't think either one of those is actually good translations. Which, of course, makes us think about, the pictures we see at Halloween, of the wide-brimmed, pointy black hats and the black cats on brooms, as she flies across the sky or something. It makes us think of the show Hocus Pocus and the Sanderson sisters or whatever.
Turns folks into a newt.
That's right.
I go back.
And of course, that's not at all what Scripture is talking about. And translating the word as medium, I think isn't helpful either, because of course, and that's what the New Revised Standard Version translates it as, the medium of Endor. Well, this is problematic too, because the term medium is associated with the spiritualist movement of the 19th into early 20th century, and that conjures up, seances around a table, in a Victorian parlor or something like that. And I think that does a better analog from the ancient world would be an oracle. She's the oracle of Endor. And when you read it like that and you start to pay close attention, then you notice that it's not a story about a witch summoning a ghost, the ghost of Samuel, that there's actually more going on there. So, for example, Saul seeks out this oracle, and oracles were always oracles for gods. And that's why he has banished all the oracles from the land of Israel, because the God of Israel doesn't speak through oracles. He speaks through his appointed prophets, right? And so that's why they have been banished from the land of Israel, because they're going to be, drawing on the power of some other God with a lowercase g, not the one God of Israel and all creation. And so he goes and he finds this oracle of Endor, and he asks her to, essentially give him a word of prophecy, you might say, a word, an oracle's word. And the way oracles worked in the ancient world was they go into a trance, and then they would relate, often in words that were not understandable to the average person. And so they sometimes needed someone else to write down what they said and interpret it, or sometimes in normal words, but relate what the God revealed to them, the lowercase g God revealed to them. And so she goes into her trance, and I invite people to look this up. I think it's 1 Samuel chapter 28, I think. Anyway, read it for yourself and read it carefully to see what's going on here. When she raises something out of the ground, the Hebrew word is she raises an Elohim. Well, Elohim is a word for God or the gods, lowercase g sometimes. So sometimes it's a word for God, capital G, and sometimes the word for gods, lowercase g. For example, in Psalm 82, which begins, the Lord took his stand in the council of the gods, or in the council of Elohim, right? So she raises up an Elohim from the ground. That's what the actual Hebrew of the text says. And then and Saul can't see it, right? So she has to tell, he can't see or hear it. So he has to ask her, what does this God look like? And she starts to describe the God, little g God, and he says, oh, it's Samuel. And then she delivers the message. But he never actually sees for himself. He never actually hears for himself, right? Because she's in a trance and she's just relating to him her oracular vision. So I really don't think that text has to do with anything that we might be thinking of when we, in our contemporary culture, talk about ghosts. That's an example of ancient oracle, and the question of whether or not the small g gods have anything to do with the large G God, and the answer is no, that they're subordinated to him, and maybe the fallen powers and principalities that Paul talks about. So those are the biblical places. I want to take one last kind of look, and then I'll turn it over to the other guys at what about stories within Christian tradition about ghosts? And the stories that we see in Christian tradition, first of all, you get some stories before the Reformation. And these stories typically portray ghosts or are understood, for example, by the medieval doctors like Thomas Aquinas, like Duns Scotus, like these other folks. They're interpreted to be the spirits or the souls of those who are in purgatory, who are allowed to return to warn you about the way you're living or scare you out of doing some kind of sin that's going to cause things to be really bad for you in purgatory, or, you know, might even be a mortal sin, something like that.
Like the
That's
Marley Brothers and Scrooge.
Say what now?
Like the Marley Brothers and Scrooge.
Exactly.
That's actually a very good example. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, so there are these souls trapped in purgatory. So when the Reformation happened, and purgatory was called into question and rejected by Protestants by and large, then a new way of interpreting what these old ghost stories might mean had to be taken on. And one of the ways that Protestants tried to understand them, and this was already a way some people before the Reformation talked about ghost stories, was that this was demonic activity. Demons would trick you into believing you were being visited by, you know, the ghost of Granny or something like that. But it wasn't actually true. And that tended to be the Protestant line, you know, after the Reformation. My problem with ghosts is, at least in any way that we conceive of ghosts in our current popular culture, is I just don't understand where they would fit in the economy of salvation. You know, I think, you know, what we're promised is resurrection of the dead and resurrection of the body. And unless I'm willing to commit to a view of purgatory, I don't know how I would make that connection of something that's not embodied continuing after death as an active force in the world or an active presence in the world. So that doesn't make sense. There's no scientific evidence or explanation for it. So it's got that going against it. And, you know, and it's interesting to me that 100 years ago, or maybe a little bit more, maybe let's say 150 years ago, though I think you could even go 100 years ago, ghosts were just a part of a panoply of, you know, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties and things that go bump in the night that people believed in, including things like vampires. And there's stories even from 19th century America. The very first lore episode talks about a story from 19th century America where they believed that some folks who had TB, tuberculosis, had in fact become vampires. People believed in things like vampires and werewolves. We don't believe in those things anymore. You know, I've never met anybody who's gotten upset if I said there's no such thing as vampires and werewolves. But for some reason, and I think it's because they're a little bit more ethereal and a little less defined, ghosts continue to haunt our culture. So how's that for a beginning?
Very Nickian.
I think it's good.
Nickian.
Yeah,
Nickelodeon.
I feel like I had a place where I was going with that, but
Is Lore a TV show?
It actually is on Amazon Prime. They've got a few episodes, but it's mostly a podcast.
Okay. I'm not familiar with it.
They're pretty good. They're good stories. I hadn't heard that the connection was made to purgatory in Middle Ages and type things, but I am very familiar with the idea that ghosts are some sort of a demonic activity. I've definitely encountered that idea. But yeah, and there's also, I mean, it's not just even ghosts too, like especially within older Christian tradition, you've got all manners of like supernatural beings that are like defeated by the saints, like I think it's Saint George in England as the Dragon Slayer, and then you've got Tales of the Gargoyle in France, which is like where the gargoyle comes from, and all kinds of things. I don't know if the Russian or the Eastern Church had some kind of a vodka sloshing monster or something like that, but
Probably did.
Those were all embodied humans, though.
St. Patrick, there's stories of St. Patrick dealing with werewolves too. I mean,
interesting.
Yeah. So
I mean, there's all manners of stuff. Again, like how much stock do we put in that? I don't know. But the stories are there. So, Pastor Lou, what do you think?
Okay, well, thank you. It gives me a good chance to disagree with Father Nick right from the start. So that's
awesome.
Great.
That's what we want.
No, it's not a question of Father Nick being wrong as much as the nuance doesn't always exist with Father Nick. He's very certain in his descriptions. The whole thing, think about this is not what I was planning on talking about, but based on Father Nick's comment, think about the way indigenous cultures view the world today. And then the Old Testament would have been tribal cultures as well. And that interaction between the spiritual world and the material world. And so when you talk about the Witch of Endor and you want to limit it based on that, the different definition on Elohim, the thing is that there is some biblical scholars that argue that Elohim is not just a singular word for God, but it can indicate those other worldly beings. And Yahweh would be the head of the God of the gods, the only God. And so it gets a little funky, but the point is that they try to argue that we don't necessarily know what those people of that time period thought based on our projection and interpretation of that ancient word. But it seems that there was an understanding that there was more things out there. And so when you have the Witch of Endor, just because she served as a sort of oracle does not mean she wasn't involved in blessing and curses. Doesn't mean that there wasn't spell casting of some sort, because in other texts of the Old Testament, it does talk about forbidding sorcery and witchcraft and other kind of things like that. So it's real hazy because it's so ancient. But look at modern culture with many different indigenous customs involving blessing and curse, and you can look at Santeria with like voodoo type curses and things like that. You cannot know for sure what the Witch of Endor was. To diminish her as just a pure oracle may be in error, but my job is not to defend her and her reputation on the street as a
sure?
witch. But
in our next episode, Father Lou defends the Witch of Endor.
Was she really all that bad?
Yeah, is she really? Think about.
I could have gotten a beer with the Witch of Endor,
Think about modern Wicca and whatnot. I mean, there's different things involved with that's very nature oriented, very not necessarily a threat. I remember kids I knew in high school reading, and it kind of goes back to that discernment discussion we had, reading white magic books and thinking it was real, and doing different things. To me it seems crazy, but there's always there's a pull for humans to want to try to control their environment. And I think that's where that sorcery and witchcraft was outlawed in the Levitical code, partly because of that. You're trying to act like God. All right, that said, I think that we do believe in an afterlife, and I think that's why folks kind of gravitate towards talking about ghosts and supernatural. You also have folks in the patristic times that would reject the talking about ghosts because they really wanted to define that the world of the living was separate from the world of the dead, and they'd often point to the parable of Lazarus and the rich man and how there was a separation. It may not fly in today's modern exegesis, but that is a story that they often point to. Augustine of Hippo suggests that there was a firm division between the land of the living and also the of the dead. But at the same time, he said, well, it could happen. He thought maybe with some angelic forces with God's, decree that something could happen. And then you can see that, particularly by the Middle Ages, as one author talks about, there's even an invasion of ghosts. I'll mention that in a second. But with Gregory the Great, there was a emphasis at that time of wanting masses said for the dead, and of course that was a moneymaker for the church, so that's might be part of it. But there's that concept of, like what you were saying with the Christmas Carol, with the wandering spirits in pain in that one scene, with Scrooge and Marley, and wandering spirits in pain coming out around Christmas time. But he thought Gregory the Great actually promoted sharing of those kind of stories because it increased revenue. That's what some folks write about. And so the Liturgy of the Dead grew much more elaborate during that time period. And that makes sense because it sets the stage for what Martin Luther is dealing with by the 1500s. I was surprised. This is not a subject that really concerns me greatly. And so I don't know it, but I wanted to, well, if we're going to talk about it, I got to know a little something. So I actually did look up a few things. And in the Liturgy of the Dead, they actually prescribed a mass for the 3rd, 7th, and 13th day after the death, for whatever reason. I would love to know why. I couldn't find out why those numbers. Was it numerology? Was it some kind of superstition? I don't know. But there's no small coincidence about Reformation Day being on All Hallows Eve. I mean, if you're going to talk about purgatory, what better time period to talk about it than when everyone's concerned about the dead? And you have All Saints Day now Nick can correct me if I'm wrong, but you all have an All Souls Day as well, Nick? Okay, Catholics have an All Saints and All Souls Day. We pretty much just have an All Saints Day, but it kind of serves some of this, well, we understand that God takes care of people after they're dead, but we do give thanks for those that have gone before us on our All Saints Day worship service. November 1st is All Saints Day in the calendar of the church. We often will move to the date nearby for a Sunday worship and call it All Saints Sunday. But that said, Luther was similar to Augustine in that he felt that if there was any kind of apparitions that could happen, he also wanted to keep a firmer border between the living and the dead, that there would be that would have to be something more demonic, where Augustine focused on maybe some kind of angelic powers. Luther focused on maybe it would probably be more of a demonic power, because it was trying to deceive you. It was using that image, that specter, to try to deceive you. And that Luther would argue, apparently, that it was not something that was really who you thought it was. It was a deception. And so it wouldn't really be a ghost in the classic sense. I do want to give credit to the essay that I wrote. I'm going to post it on Facebook. I found it really fascinating. There's this professor from Hull in England who wrote an article called Martin Luther Ghostbuster. And by David Baggett. I hope I pronounce his name correctly.
By Dave who?
The professor over there. And I found it very interesting. He surveyed all of Martin Luther's writings and kind of focused on different things when he talked about spirits, ghosts.
Did you say Dave Baggett?
Bagchi. So I think it's Bagchi.
Oh, got you.
And unless he's like a Nick 40 or something, says Bag Chai or Che, I don't know. But you never know with people's names. But anyway, it's an article from 2012, and I just happened because I wanted to know what the heck did Luther have to say about this, right? And I didn't really know, because it's not something I've really cared about. And Luther did use metaphorical uses for it, but he also, like I said, thought that if you did have a real vision of some sort, it was going to be a deception, and the devil was trying to mislead you, particularly in the case of if it was convincing you, as Gregory argued that it was asking you to pay for more masses. That's obviously a lie. It's not needed. So that actually came up in the misuse of the mass, an essay in 1521, which I've read a long time ago, and I didn't remember this, but apparently that's part of it, is that he's trying to argue against that practice. He did. I found this fascinating in that article too. I can't mention all the different cases, but he mentions little cases that Luther referred to, and it's really pretty interesting. But one of them is was this one blacksmith's servant that was trying to. It sounds like maybe trying to get out of work by saying that the blacksmith's area was possessed by a ghost or something. And so Luther, one of the interesting things, Luther's very passionately care oriented, and it seems that he really would, even though he didn't necessarily believe in ghosts, he felt that you needed to take it seriously. And so he didn't just laugh at the guy. He didn't say, well, you're just faking, but he said, well, what you should do is fear God, hear God's word, and return to your master's house. And then if you see that specter, if you see that ghost, and it's telling you to flee, tell you that I won't obey you, I will obey God. And that's so Catholic, Roman Catholic. And I'll talk about that in a minute as well, that the idea, that in faith, these creatures, if they exist, have no power over you. They're going to flee from the name of Jesus Christ spoken in faith. And so that's kind of his attitude, and he also felt the devil, cannot do anything more than deceive you. So don't be afraid. And so there's another funny case that I want to share because I think you guys will enjoy it. But there's a story of a flatulent exorcist. It was this woman.
Oh boy. It was a woman.
Yeah, because she wasn't a priest. It was an exorcism of sorts, that she was being accosted from the spiritual realm, allegedly. And so she's in Magdeburg, Germany, and she farted and it forced the spirit to flee. But
the smell was so bad.
Yeah, Luther advised, don't make a habit of accosting demons like that, because you can't play with your fate, right? Because it could come back. The devil, Father Adam, do not laugh. The devil is not easily mocked. So that was his reasoning, which I loved. I love that. Who knows if he thought that was a real story or not, but that's the way he talked about it. And but this is where it gets serious, that I think it really does fit for those that are worried about ghosts and all those scary things. He answered this in a case. He said that if you should have a poltergeist or a rempelgeist in your house, do not go and discuss it here and there, but know that it's not a good spirit and it does not come from God. Cross yourself quietly. Trust in your faith. If God has sent him to punish you, as he did with the pious Job, be ready and suffer willingly. But if the spirit has his own little game with you, despise him with a strong faith and courageously put your trust in God's word. He will not harm you or attack God's word. And even with the vision, just like we were talking about with discernment, it's an element of testing it for truth. And that really reflects a lot of the Catholic understanding when I was a missionary in South Dakota. A lot of the indigenous peoples we worked out with there had a lot of beliefs in spirits and other things still, and many other things. There was even talk of a shape changer when I was out there. And it's one of those things. How do you encounter this pastorally? How do you respect the culture and interact with it, even though it's something outside of my realm of experience? But one thing that the Catholic Church is ultimately taught when it's talking about exorcisms and things like that, it's an element of really you're casting something out in the name of Jesus Christ. Spoken in faith is enough. But that's why, part of the whole sign of the cross, blessing yourself with the cross in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. You're invoking God, the Holy Spirit, to come in. You're blessing yourself, and that is something that also cannot abide evil. And it's a way to kind of, in with the good, out with the bad, almost in a very childlike way. But exorcism as a Catholic practice is, yes, there's a ritual for exorcism, but they also understand that some of these other practices, blessing homes and whatnot, which I've done not just for people moving into a new home, but also after someone had a death and they were kind of freaked out about it. So it is an act of assurance in a pastoral way, but you're inviting the Holy Spirit, the triune God, to care for that home, protect it from harm and every evil. And so when we, most Lutheran pastors would not think of that as an exorcism per se, or any kind of thing dealing with the evil in the world, but at some level, there's parallels to it. And even with exorcisms now, you will see articles about how there's more of them going on in the Catholic faith tradition right now during this time period. It's a time of upheaval. There's probably a lot of people mentally, emotionally, spiritually upset. But there's stories of the movie The Exodus. Exorcist. Exorcist. Sorry, it's been a long week. Let me tell you. I need.
It's only Monday.
But I want an exodus after this week. The Exorcist. The priests that were involved with that, one was skeptic, and others thought that there was something that happened. There's books on it from the notes that were made. It was basically a story of a young boy in Maryland, and he was Lutheran, and the Lutheran pastor encountered some weird stuff and goes, "This is not really, we don't really have a ritual for this," and he passed him on to the Catholics, which I find fascinating. He passed him on to the Catholics, and then the Catholics got involved with trying to do this, and because of the weird supernatural stuff that happened, that at least allegedly supernatural stuff that happened, that's where there was some inspiration for the movie. As crazy it is, it wasn't as crazy as what's in the movie, but there was some weird stuff that happened, that whether it was someone faking it, including the boy, or whether it was perception or whatever, it was deemed by some as a real case of exorcism. And interesting for Father Nick, this is interesting, you may not realize it, when we were talking about discernment and we mentioned Ouija boards and things like that, right? And you're not saying a game, right? You're not saying game. The whole thing started with that kid playing with the Ouija board. Now the thing is, though, it goes back to what we said, that if it wasn't a fake and he really believed it, then you can maybe open yourself up to evil, not the game itself. I feel nothing has power over me like that because I believe in Jesus Christ. And so I don't feel that this is a huge issue for me, because you know what? If I was to ever meet a spirit, I hope that my faith would kick in, that I would just hold on to that and say, maybe I'll just let out a fart. I don't know. I'll just say,
You're so scared.
Yeah.
I just want to make it clear that we here at Three Priests and Sweet Baby Nick do not endorse Ouija board activity.
However, we do endorse farting at demons.
We do endorse.
I don't want to get people exercised if they're using something like that, or tarot cards or something. But it's just it all depends on who the person is and what's going on. But in general, Scripture says don't mess with the spirit world. That's probably good safety practice.
I mean, we've got enough crap going on in the physical world that's enough to deal with.
But the thing is,
why complicate things?
You're covered. That's the most important thing out of all of these stories, funny or not, real or not. You're covered. Mm-hmm. You are saved. You are baptized. And so it's the same thing about our salvation. Don't be stressing about it. And that can encourage you to deal with these things.
I think there is an interesting note as far as like some of these exorcisms are concerned. Some of them are fairly well documented incidents of things happening, as far as like the notes on some of these incidents are incredibly detailed and well preserved. If that's something that you're skeptical about or anything like that, just know there are resources. Like, it's not just like a bunch of people going out and telling stories. If you're not interested, if you'd rather stay away from that, totally understand. It's definitely not something everybody should get involved in.
Well, I know Nick's waiting to say something, but just before I forget my train of thought, which I forget a lot these days, like in the book of Judges, it talks about that prophecy and other spiritual things seem to be down during that time period. But then when you have Jesus Christ coming into the world, what is everyone talking about? All these signs and portents of something big happening, which would make sense if that, it could connect to that. But at the same time, when the culture is in upheaval, when people are uncertain and feeling dismoored, then there is a chance for folks to get more sensitive and to see things and misinterpret things. But at the same time, as a hospice chaplain, there were many, many times I had someone before they died believe that they saw and encountered somebody that was from their life before, and as a vision, as some kind of encounter. And also even after death, the survivor is experiencing something that they perceived as supernatural. And one might say, well, that can't be true. But even within Jesus's time, one of the reasons that I would argue that is probably why it took 3 days for Jesus to rise from the dead is there was a cultural belief that the spirit stayed in the world for 3 days. And so by Jesus being dead for 3 days and then rising, we know he's really dead culturally. Now, I don't know the source material. I've read this in scholarship. But cultural belief and experience shapes our encounter with these things. And sometimes it's false and sometimes it's true. And just the fact that Jesus says he was not a spirit does not necessarily mean that he believes in spirits. He's encountering the culture. Nick, you were really being polite. What did you want to share?
His mic was muted by the moderator.
I'm the moderator. I was muting my own mic. I was just gonna say Pastor Lou wants an Exodus, but he's gonna get an exorcist. That's
Hey, I'm welcome to have anyone pray for me.
Yeah, I appreciate what, especially what you said there towards the end of that, Lou. I mean, one thing that let me be for a second the Scully of the Chi files.
That surprises me, no end.
Well, and just say, just because people have kept copious notes about some experience doesn't mean that it's been within a scientifically established. So, I mean, there's a scene in the book Dracula where the cohort that's about to go out and they're hunting Dracula to kill him. They collect together all of their, if you've ever read the novel, it's an epistolary novel, right? And so it's made up of letters and journal entries and that kind of stuff. And they're getting ready to go off and kill Dracula. And they don't know what's going to happen when they do that. Of course, in the book, spoiler alert, he turns to dust, right? But they don't know that, right? And so they're about to go drive, a knife into the chest and cut off the head of this guy, right? They could be, arrested for such behavior. And they say, oh, well, if need be, we'll show them our collected notes. Well, that's not going to stand up in a court of law, like just because you've got some notes saying we think this guy's a vampire doesn't mean that that's going to actually carry any weight. No, it's the same thing with any kind of testimonies about these kinds of things. As Pastor Lou was saying, if people are primed for interpreting it in a certain way, they may, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily the case, but they may see it. They may be more likely to read into it things that are not necessarily spiritual.
But at the same time, like Augustine and Luther said, well, at some level, they would never say never. I find that interesting. Never say never. But in general, the reality is, no, I don't think there's a lot of ghosts and specters running around.
Yeah. I mean, even personally for me, that's kind of where I fall. I'm like, I'm not totally ready to just say, nah, none of that is real. Cause there's enough testimony out there for me to just be like, I wonder if not that everything they're saying is 100% accurate, but there's a lot of people reporting somewhat similar things. Makes me wonder if maybe some of them might be seeing something. I don't know. As to what that something is, no, not really a clue. I have my theories, but
that goes back to Luther in his example, trying to be pastoral in response. He didn't just go right up to the person and say, you're crazy, you're full of crap. He encountered them where they're at. On one hand, you don't want to in our knowledge today in modern times. You don't want to encourage a delusion,
Sure.
but at the same time, to listen and kind of work with the person is not a bad thing necessarily.
Yeah, and another thing that Lou said that I mean, at some point I guess we should let Father Adam talk, but I
Yeah,
don't.
I was going to say, speaking of crazy, we need to move the mic. So
Right. But I did want to say another thing that Lou mentioned that I think is important is it is true that there's lots of incidents where people, especially as they themselves come close to, even if they're not ready to die, if they just come close to death, they see. And I think in fact, drawing on Augustine, we can say that it may be that God chooses to allow some people to see the resurrected dead and of the communion of saints, so that they can have a foretaste and enter into death with confidence, knowing that resurrection lies on the other side, that they will be alive in Christ with the hope.
Or a comfort for the grieving person.
Right,
I mean,
right.
you just don't know.
That's right.
But you can be confident because you belong to Jesus Christ that you don't have to worry about being harmed.
Yeah. Should we turn it over to Father Adam now?
we should. I would be curious to know. I would especially be curious to know, being part of an older tradition, a much older tradition. Does the Orthodox Church do exorcisms?
That depends. Older tradition. We're still the church. You know that, right, Nick? Sweet baby Nick. You know that Father Nick and I are still part of the
Yeah,
church.
That's why I said
Jesus Christ.
We are the tradition from which all of you are copying.
Did I freeze up there?
A little bit.
I need a beer.
I did freeze up there. Okay. I was going to say, being part of a that's why I said tradition and not like yeah, I don't know.
Being the church,
Being the church, do you guys know? I actually would be curious. Do you guys have rites of exorcism?
We do. Actually, the most easily approached one out of the Trebnik, or what is that called in English? I'm having a block here. Well, I would jokingly call it our Book of Common Prayer. The Book of Needs. Sorry, it would not come to my mind there. Which, interestingly, if you put the Book of Needs up next to the Book of Common Prayer, like, oh, that's where the Book of Common Prayer got it. Cranmer was copying out of the Trebnik, which is to say they draw on similar ancient prayer formulas, and sometimes you'll find that they're nearly verbatim. But the most easily appropriated one would be the exorcism prayers of St. Basil the Great, which are fairly well known in both the East and the West. And it's sort of one of, I guess you could say, one that would sort of track with what Father Lou was just talking about. Like, you know what? Don't mess with it too much because it's really a distraction. But here's a prayer, declaring the, be gone, demons. I've got better things to do with my time, basically. So that's a default one for me. And but that being said, there are more extensive exorcism prayers available, and obviously within the tradition of the church, exorcism certainly didn't just start because of long-leggedy beasties and things that go bump in the night out of the Scottish Trebnik, or the Scottish Book of Common Prayer, or whatever. The rituals and rites of exorcism, they do exist. It's a real thing. Now, what are we exercising? I, for one, never exercise, and I'm just kidding. What are we exercising? Like, clearly it's demonic powers. There's no, I mean, the church would not make any case or defense for ghosties or the ghoulies and what have you. The stuff of fantasy, which, by the way, is very interesting. And the things that surround the fantasy that we have built up culturally around Halloween, and or that we think about more oftentimes, I suppose, at Halloween. All that the church would really ever say about that is everything including anything that distracts you from salvation, is the work of demonic powers. That's the evil one and his minions, which I seriously doubt look like the minions that are on Despicable Me, but I kind of wish they did. The evil one and his minions are hard at work in some cases. In some cases, they've got their feet up because we're doing a fine job of ourselves, distracting ourselves and seeking out all manner of evil for ourselves with our voracious appetite for sin. But the evil one is hard at work at anybody who is prayerful or attempting to repent or attempting to allow the Holy Spirit to transform them, at distracting them from their path, especially during the time of Great Lent or the time of Small Lent, Winter Lent, Advent, which we're approaching. The evil one begins to work a little bit harder. Like, it's like you can imagine Santa's elves working harder towards Christmas, right? Like the evil one and his minions work harder, at the time of fasting, when the Christian is attempting to deny himself indulgence and distraction and sate all of those fleshly things and pursuits, and to deny the indulgence of fleshly pursuits. This is when the evil one has to work harder to distract, because the process of fasting and praying is maddening to Satan. And so all manner of distractions will be employed to knock one off of the path or create distractions. So all distraction, even if it seems very innocent, is the work of the evil one. If it has anything to do with the taking you off of the path of salvation, then it is the work of Satan, who is very active in the world, and he even says that he is himself in Scripture. This is attested to, honestly. Job is not like a fable. This is recorded on purpose. It's not just a cautionary tale. It's, be warned, this stuff is going on. The devil is real, and he feeds off of real life. In fact, he takes his life because he is absolutely the antithesis of life, having rejected the source of all life. But with regard to exorcisms, have I ever done one like a house exorcism? Absolutely, I have. But that is a rather, for want of a better word, anticlimactic service, because it is one that says, all right, demons, bugger off. Have a nice day, ma'am. I'll take a sandwich if you don't mind. I'm like, my services are obviously we don't charge for that, but it's one of those, we've done our duty. We don't have to get a whole lot of investment in it, because this is the prayers of the church. Thank you and good night, and that's sufficient. But there is a more elaborate, I should say, or quote unquote hardcore tradition of exorcism that one must not enter into as a priest outside of the specific blessing of one's archbishop or bishop, with specific instructions. In fact, at one point I inquired not of my own archbishop, not permission to do an exorcism, but there is a family member of a former parishioner who is well known to experience like extraordinary mental illness, to the point that I have and this woman have wondered if maybe she is being possessed, which I suspect that there's a possibility that that's the case, and I've encountered it before, where I was quite sure of it. I was 100% sure of it. I was at that time not a priest, but and my archbishop says, don't do an exorcism. He absolutely forbade it. And I said, no, I'm not even asking your blessing to do one. I wouldn't, because there is a friend of mine who is a priest, actually in my diocese, who is, well, I don't want to say licensed exorcist. We don't like print cards or anything, but his exorcism.
There is a union, though. There is a union.
There is a union where they will not be denied.
A mystical union.
But he is, and not a lot of people know this about him, because obviously it's not something you hang a shingle out for. But he is an exorcist, and has studied. He actually studied for part of that in Rome, because there is it's a kind of a, it's not, I suppose, Roman Catholic specific. It's a, so you're interested in kicking out demons? It's like you go to Dargan Alley and get your casting out demons books. No, he's an exorcist, and there is definitely stuff that he's seen and done that I've never really grilled him about, mostly purposefully not being curious.
Yeah.
And what I always caution people is, like, the more you think about stuff like that, or want to even ask questions about things like that, the more you are tempted toward distraction of that kind, and open yourself up to that kind. I mean, life is too short to be distracted by that too much. If you have to be, and here's the thing, here's why not every priest is an exorcist, and because clearly demonic activity is going on all the time. It's because of what is required of a man to be able to cast out demons. In order to invoke the name of Christ effectively in the presence of something that would recoil at the name of Christ, you have to be someone of a pure enough heart, who isn't guilty of blasphemy at any time recently. You have to be somebody who is prepared through prayer and fasting and almsgiving for a sufficient amount of time to go in and do the hard work that's going to happen if you're going to actually be casting out demon.
That's the Western Roman tradition as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's serious stuff.
Special vocation.
What's that?
Special vocation within the vocation of being
a
pastor.
Yeah, it's not every priest that's capable of doing it. I am not capable of it.
And it's scriptural as well, because not even the apostles were able to cast out all demons.
Right. Well, and Christ addresses it specifically. Like, why couldn't we do that? Because he came to us first, because we were like they were like Christ's handlers, so to speak. Like, talk to his homies first and see if you can get to the big guy. And they're like, well, we kind of tried to cast out the demon, and why wasn't it leaving? Because we were, we're your entourage, we're your posse, and we have believed and dropped everything to follow you. I thought we were in the club.
Think about how difficult that vocation must be. I compare it to the folks that used to work with like child abuse and child pornography and everything in law enforcement, or any of those kind of really out there things, that how much you need a healthy spiritual life to deal with that. You need to know who you are to deal with that. And it's kind of an attack on you just dealing with it. So that's why I think Paul argued that we should always think about what's good, right? I think it's in Philippians, think about these things. Think about the good things. Don't focus on all this other crap.
I have had children who are especially vulnerable. That is an extremely vulnerable group for demonic attack. Who have come to my own children, and other children as well have come to me at different times throughout the years with because you can, especially when it's your own kid, you can tell when they're full of crap or when something's amiss, or they've encountered something that's certainly not explainable and seems to be not dream state sort of nonsense. And I've encountered several times among more than one of my own children, where they seem to have had some kind of interaction with something that was not desirable. Without getting into a lot of details, because then we could.
It wasn't a clown with a red balloon, though, right?
It was not a clown with a red balloon. That was actually me at the window tormenting them.
Wrinkles the clown, man. No, that's serious. Have you ever looked up Wrinkles the Clown? It's crazy.
No.
It's this dude out of Florida who parents would pay to come and scare their children.
No.
There's a documentary on Hulu. It's crazy.
That's abusive.
That is at least borderline abusive. Like, parents listening, don't do that to your kids.
And of course it would be Florida, right? Of course
it would be Florida.
Florida,
Yeah.
Florida man. Yes. now, in particular, one time when my daughter mentioned an experience, and I was in the seminary at the time. I was not even ordained. At least I don't think so. I might have been a deacon. And my daughter is not prone to inventive stories. This is my second oldest daughter, and not prone to fantasy or elaborate imagination, making things up or whatever. So it was a very uncharacteristic thing for her to come to us with, or the fact that she would even come to us, because she's always so independent. Like, she would be the first one to call BS on anything, and she, in a very humble, not even a fearful way, just like, hey, this happened, or I experienced this. And she had a few episodes of that throughout the years as a younger child. And I said, well, all right, I know what to do. We went straight up to the monastery and visited with my spiritual father, our confessor, who was a monk, Father Gabriel. And we stood in one of the chapels, and he anointed my daughter with the unction. Just, he didn't do a whole unction service, but he anointed her with the oil of the sick, and said a few prayers, and that was it. And it never happened again. It was just an affirmative, what's the word, palliative or curative action, and it is good medicine. And it's obviously an act of faith. It's not like he made a potion. It's not like there's 11 herbs and spices in the secret spices in the oil of the sick. It's anointing oil. It's salve, which has been prayed over and blessed, and it dispels the demons. Like the sound of bells is said to dispel the demons, because these are, this is why we baptize bells and give them names, because the sound of the bells is the clarion call of Christ, and which is, it is repugnant sound in the ears, so to speak.
That's a great tradition of the church, both East and West. A lot of people don't recognize it or remember it nowadays, because there's a tendency to poo-poo anything that comes out of the spiritual realm like that. But Martin Luther used to talk about that with song in general. That's singing hymns loud is also something that keeps you safe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and other times, with one of my sons, and other.
Did we lose him?
It was a spiritual demonic intervention.
Yeah, we lost you there for a second, Father Adam.
Oh, am I back?
You're back now, yes.
We can't hear you still. No.
So Father Nick won't hear me disparaging him because he can't hear my voice. So my son, one of my sons, has come to me before, having reported being tormented in dreams, which obviously is always a questionable state, always left up to the imagination, which he has a big imagination. He's a kind of a brilliant kid. But I over the years have kind of learned how to sort of filter like fantasy from like something's going on. It just kind of the way he describes things, and you can usually tell where he's taking a jog down crazy lane, or taking a jog down, hey, this kind of happened, or I experienced this. So you can usually, I guess you become an expert on your kids after a while. And so I could tell when he was where certain concerns were coming from at different times. And my constant reminder to him is, all that you need to do at any time is, if you're awake, you cross yourself, or hell, in a dream, cross yourself too. And truly invoke the name of Christ. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. This is the prayer of the heart, the Jesus prayer. And that this is putrid and repugnant to the demonic powers, and they will depart. And if they persist, say it again.
That's very Lutheran of you.
Well, as you were describing that before, I was like, gosh, that sounds fairly orthodox.
Well, I'm telling you, man, we're gonna be this catalyst for this incredible ecumenical revival in the
It'd be
world.
great.
Orthodox Lutheran community coming
Lutheran
up.
in droves to the Orthodox Church where they belong. They could even be Western Rite if they like, because we do have a very robust Western Rite that not even a lot of Eastern Rite Orthodox know about. Hang on, I want to look.
Let me interject here and just say we should probably start wrapping things up because we've been going for a little while. I would like to conclude with just one more a rapid fire round of questions, just in the kind of the spirit of, well, I guess I don't want to say the spirit of, but like in the general festivities of Halloween.
Wait,
as we're
don't
going
I get
through.
a rebuttal? Don't I get to talk? I have so many things to say.
You got more?
It's huge. I got so many things to say. Don't I get?
Can I mute him?
Oh yeah, please do what the moderators wouldn't. But I would like to kind of go around because there's interesting little thing that I came up on recently. One of the big things that people do around Halloween is kind of similar vein to what Father Nick was saying he did with Sarah. We watch spooky movies, we watch horror movies. So to some people, if they like them. I would be curious to know, if you do, what is kind of your go-to horror movie or Halloween movie kind of around this time, just as kind of a casual end to the podcast. And I bring that up because for people who might be listening to this and saying like, why are Christians talking about horror movies? I would just like to point out that what's the guy's name? I can't find it. Scott Derrickson. A guy named Scott Derrickson. If you're a horror movie fan, you might know who he is. He is a horror movie director who has directed movies such as where is his list here? The Exorcism of Emily Rose, Deliver Us from Evil, and one of the most popular horror movies of all time, Sinister. He is a committed Christian, which I was very surprised to find out. And he's also the director of Doctor Strange in the Marvel universe, which I thought was interesting too. He is a do what?
That's such a good movie. But I say that
It is.
Doctor Strange is like one of my absolute favorite comic book characters. So
I can see that.
You're like, dare I say, Nick is like a book.
But yeah, he is a committed Christian and sees horror movies as like this perfect catalyst to show the war between like good and evil, and has produced like great art out of it. So it's really interesting. I encourage you to look him up. But I would be curious, do you guys watch any? And like, what is, just like real quick as we're wrapping up here, what is kind of your favorite if you do?
I gotta say, my favorite horror movie is Les Miserables. I mean, it's a guilty pleasure, and it's horrifying to see such communist socialist.
Oh my God. I hate communism as much as Father Adam, but
and, the rabble, getting too big for their britches. But I do love that movie
I'm
so much.
assuming he doesn't have one.
Yeah, I guess Father Adam doesn't watch horror movies, but
I had to throw that one in there.
Did you ever watch horror movies? Is there anything you want to add to this conversation? Or
I don't not like horror movies. I have found very few of them to have good acting, so I don't have like a huge one. But I did enjoy. I think the last one I remember was Scream from like 20 some years ago, because it was hokey.
It's very hokey,
but I just always remember Drew Barrymore screaming in that movie, and I thought it was such a funny movie. Like
Father Adam's hokey, so
that's the I never really considered Scream a horror movie. It's more just like a slasher thriller type thing. It's like nothing really scary that happens in that movie. Scary Movie as a parody of that is.
That was also very good. No, one that I thought was really I guess if you want to say one that really creeped me out and made me want to go take a shower and like scrub my eyes, was 8mm.
Never
Nicholas,
saw 8mm.
oh, I would say I recommend it, but I don't know if I truly do, because this is when I was a Catholic, and Monsignor Kelly of blessed memory had called me up and said, "Hey, you know this guy?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "Well, you're gonna be his confirmation sponsor because he's gonna get confirmed next weekend and he doesn't have anybody." And I was like, "All right, yeah." I've met him a couple of times and he ended up eventually becoming my son's godfather. We became very good friends. But as like an icebreaker, we had him over for dinner, and then he and I went out to a movie at the Bird Theater in Carytown. Well, it was 8mm. And we like walked back in silence and just utter disgust. and that's a very good movie, very well done. It's a movie about it has to do with a snuff flick, but that's not the whole thing. It's also finding a killer. But it's so friggin' creepy and gives you EBGBs. Like, and it's not really a cult or having to do with demonic things, so to speak. It's like, because humans are pretty evil anyway. Like they can be. So I think some of the ones, if there's any horror movie that's ever really gotten to me, it has to do more with the believable stuff that people do, not the fantastical spiritual world sort of stuff. Because we don't even have to go there to find horrific things. And my good movies like that are meant for entertainment that are all too real sometimes give you that the agita more than anything else.
This is reminding me of when we had What the Halo, and he came up, we were asked for 3 saints, and he keeps coming up with stuff.
We had like 9 at that episode. Just for viewers who might be interested, because I'd never heard of 8mm. Apparently it's a Nick Cage movie.
Yeah, it's one of his better movies. Really quite good.
So that's either points against it or points for it. So,
he's a good actor who oftentimes takes on really terrible roles. That's my take on Nicolas Cage.
Other people would say differently, but okay. What about the rest of you?
Nick Cage is like the Schrodinger's cat of actors, right? I mean, he's both good and bad as an actor. Like
Thank you again for tuning into this 3 Priests episode of Actor Reviews.
It all just depends on the observer and how they collapse the quantum state. I mean, he either comes off as the best actor or the worst. But anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah, he's got some real eggs that he's laid.
Yeah, some rotten eggs.
Rotten eggs.
Well, I can say that I don't really I'm not a horror movie guy. I'm not a true crime guy. I'm not the violence and everything, as I've seen enough in real life. I don't need to have it.
I get
that.
But
out of the ones the few I did see before I was a pastor, before I was in seminary, I mean, they're old, and even though they don't explicitly call it a horror movie, it's more of a slasher movie. It was an element of like spiritualism to it. Halloween was classic.
Oh, yeah.
When we were in the theater, I remember everyone in the theater jumping at certain scenes. It was a new to the genre and everything, but that was pretty well done. It is what it is. And then I had, when we were out in South Dakota, there was one time we only had one theater in our town, and so you kind of had to go to what was there. And the kids wanted to go to a movie, and they really, really wanted to go to Bride of Chucky, and that one is really. It is such a parody. It is funny. It's like even the kids are laughing. It's just so funny. Bride of Chucky was just but the one that I remember when I was working at Mary Washington College, and I went with some university students to Blair Witch Project.
Yo,
that was
that's
well
an intense
done.
movie. Really good.
And left lots of the imagination. That's the strength of it. And the way they integrated into social media and web media, to try to make it look real, that had so many people going, that believe that there was something to this story, which kind of is a cultural critique. I mean, I don't know if that would stand up now as a long-term thing, but you got to give it credit for how they did what they did.
Blair Witch Project really really brought the found footage form of movies to the forefront, and droves and droves of movies have followed that. You know, movies
Yeah.
like Cloverfield, As
Yep.
Above, So Below, all kinds of things.
Oh yeah. Anyway, that's what my 3 would be.
Okay, Father Nick, take us out with what you and Sarah might have as a favorite horror movie.
All right. Well,
Thomas
I can't,
Aquinas Goes to Hollywood.
I can't speak for Sarah. She actually really likes like the true crime kind of stuff, and I don't get into that at all. I'm not interested in serial killers and that kind of stuff. Like it just but
I am if they've been caught. If they haven't, I'm a little worried.
Sure. I think the pinnacle for me, like the best horror movie, but it's not like a go-to that I can watch every year because I think it's just too intense, is The Exorcist. I mean, that's such a well done movie, and I've read the book, the novel that it's based on, and equally difficult to get through. But I I'd also say about that like nothing has kind of shaped the modern imagination about what demons are and possession is and all that kind of stuff as much as that movie, right?
Yeah.
Turning around the pea soup, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate what Father Adam had to say at first, and then he kept droning on and on. But at first, when he yeah, that in some ways, it's evil and demonic influences much more banal. It's that just that it's for most of us, it's just the whispering in the ear telling us that we're not worthy of God's love. The thing that that drives it's the word that gets inside of us that drives us to distraction or despair. And it's but that doesn't make it any less demonic just because it's not heads turning around and pea soup coming out or whatever,
Right.
And the response is just the same, cling to Christ, to the word of the gospel, and to sacramentals if you have them, rosaries and the Jesus prayer and all that kind of stuff, making the sign of the cross. And so anyway, so I just wanted to say I appreciated that. In terms of movies, though, one that I watch probably every year is Sleepy Hollow with Johnny Depp.
That's a good movie.
Yeah,
Great.
I enjoy that one a lot.
I do too.
And then maybe my guilty pleasure is, and I've already mentioned it once, is the Disney movie Hocus Pocus.
Yep. Classic.
Okay.
Love it.
I've
Love
watched
it.
that since I was
That's a
like in
good
middle
one.
school or whatever. And
I do love that movie. I didn't think of it in this genre of art, but
30 years since I've seen that movie.
but I agree with you. The Exorcist, otherwise known as the Exodus, is the classic for that kind of demonic film. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree. Yeah.
I
Hey,
think
one that I think people should look into because it's kind of like thriller / horror is General's Daughter.
The what?
The General's Daughter.
John Travolta is in it. Which,
Oh my goodness.
Never mind.
He actually is serious and plays a good role in that. And also, what's his name?
I think we need to kill this episode. Is what we need to do.
Anyway, it's a good movie.
I think we're on time change coming up, so we need to.
We are.
Stop Father Adam from talking. Usually it's Father Nick, but Father Adam was possessed this week.
I was possessed.
I think just to wrap us up, for me, that there's no better horror movie than that classic Jim Henson flick, The Muppets Christmas Carol.
There you go.
That's my Sarah's favorite right there.
Yeah. No, seriously, that Jacob Marley door knocker scene scared me until I was like 16.
It's Marley and Marley. There's
like double the Marleys. Like
because of those two guys.
yeah. No,
yeah, I think their names are Biden and Trump.
I don't know. One of them really looks like Bernie.
That's true.
But I think for me, like some of my favorites are like, I love Hocus Pocus, but like the first two Insidious movies are actually really good. If you've never seen those, those kind of break the mold of horror movies in like having a decent plot that you can follow along. It's not just, oh, there's a ghost. It jumped out at me. Everybody's dead. It's like there's a decent universe built with that. It's good world building in a story. So I highly recommend that. And I mentioned this earlier, but another really good one is As Above, So Below, which is a movie about like this group of archaeologists / explorers that go into the wait, did I freeze?
No,
Oh,
I see it.
This group of explorers that go into the Paris catacombs in search of the fabled Philosopher's Stone. And it's really good. It's another one of those found footage movies, but it's an interesting plot and interesting kind of exploration of like underground Paris and things like that. It's cool. I recommend it. It's not too terribly scary, but it's suspenseful in places where it could be. All right, we have gone well beyond our benchmark time in doing this. I can see Father Lou's eyes getting more tired with every passing minute.
Actually, I had an important email came in, and I had to do multitask while we were talking.
So, who's got the most appropriate prayer to send us out?
Or spell or what?
You should share that Scottish one, Nick.
Oh yeah, that actually is possibly the most appropriate.
Right. That's fine. So when I get to after I say things that go bump in the night, your response is "Good Lord, deliver us." So from Ghoulies and Ghosties and Long-leggedy Beasties and things that go bump in the night.
Good Lord, deliver us.
All right, that was a good prayer.
Nice. And I'll cut it there in the audio.
We'll see you all next time. Yeah.
Long-leggedy.
How long?